these short messages. Well, welcome back to what is now the Sim Racing GP podcast powered by Moser Racing, episode number 3. And you join myself, Alex Goldschmidt, but I've got someone alongside me for this one. A very, very good evening to the man behind Odin Racing. Good evening, Jonny Ashley. How you doing?
Yeah, not bad. Yourself?
All good, all good. And we have, from Alpine Esports, a very warm welcome to Matt Bintcliffe. How are you doing? Good to have you with us tonight.
Yeah, doing well. How is everyone else?
All good, all good. So, Matthew, first of all, you've been part of the Alpine Esports team for over the last year and a bit. I think that all started with...
three years now, I think.
3 years, is it?
Yeah, I started during COVID, so I think this is my 3rd year. So it's, it's been a fairly long time in sort of the new world of sim racing and esports.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, Renault Sport Racing was part of what you started off as, being sort of like the esports attaché, if you will. But your esports journey started a lot earlier than that, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm more from the esports side than I am from the motorsport or sort of sim racing side. So a bit of an interesting person to bring in to work behind the scenes for Alpine, or as you sort of said, Renault, when I very first sort of started working alongside the brands. But I have a huge sort of esports back catalogue, various sort of small teams, small companies, going back from when I was at university. Decided that I didn't really like studying and that playing video games during classes was far more entertaining. That's a joke. Please study. Please stay in school, kids. No, but we ran a society for various sort of esport games. League of Legends, Call of Duty, Smite, whatever was popular at the time. And sort of, I just found out I was pretty good at telling people what sim racing, what esports was, and how they could use it for their business or for their company, and sort of ultimately led me down a path to where I did a bit of sort of consultancy for Renault, as they were the F1 team at the time, and then sort of when the transition to Alpine happened, I sort of got an opportunity, I guess, to come work for Alpine, and I've been doing so ever since.
Jonny, well, firstly, good to have you on with us. Jumping in last minute, really do appreciate it, buddy. And finally, we get to have a proper natter about esports as well. Have you got a first question for Matthew?
I suppose it's more of a question for as a whole of so you give us a bit about your past, but how does someone who's bang average at sim racing like myself actually get into the world of esports racing, I suppose?
Well, as someone who is below average at sim racing, I guess it's one of those things, right? Like, how do you become a professional footballer, or how do you become a professional piano player? Like, it's time and passion and energy, right? You need to be passionate about it. You need to want to do it. You can't half-ass these things. You can't just turn up and do, well, I'll do one race, a month and see how that goes, right? You've got to commit yourself to it, and it's the same for sort of any discipline. Obviously, sim racing has some limits in the fact that it's not necessarily the cheapest of things to afford, but equally it's far cheaper than real racing. So if you're passionate about motorsports and you want to get into the world of racing, then sim racing is becoming more and more of a healthy alternative, or even side by side, right? Because there are There are plenty of young kids now who, when they're not karting on the weekends, they're in the sims during the week, and they're practicing tracks, not just tracks that they compete in for their karts, but they're practicing global, racing tracks from every discipline. And so, suddenly you've got a whole generation of people that are just that much better, that much quicker, that much sort of knowledgeable, right? That's a really long answer to the question, but yeah, I think you have to be passionate, and you have to want to do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we find a lot of people in Onid that we've got some guys that would race with us that are mad on esports, and they're actually in esports teams. And it's the pace differential is quite incredible from your average sim racer. But I don't know what you guys, as your team, or what equipment they use and things like that. But it's really easy to get in at a base level into esports and into sim racing. And what would you say to anyone who's watching this, who might not have a wheel, or might not, it's first time watching? And what would you say about getting into it, and what benefits has it had for you and your team, and for people racing as well?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you said, there's so much equipment sort of available these days, and the barrier to entry is increasingly coming down. Right, we're seeing more and more sort of brands join the space, and offering competitive priced versions of this and that. So I think it gives people sort of hope, and you don't have to break the bank, right? You don't have to go and spend thousands of pounds on your first sort of sim racing experience. I mean, when I was young, I was playing the Colin McRae rally games, and I was playing on whatever steering wheel you could get from the local sort of from Game, or I don't even know what it was called before it was Game, but and it was certainly not anywhere near what you can get these days, and probably cost a comparable price, but the equipment's just so much better, right? That you can have a go, I think, at a reasonable price point, especially if you're passionate. I think people who are playing on consoles, or who are playing with controllers. I don't know anyone who plays with mouse and keyboard. If someone out there does, then please let me know, because that's hilarious. But most people are playing with a joystick, or from their consoles, and then it's like, well, actually, I can go and get a relatively reasonable price setup, and especially if you're in that space, you end up making friends in that space, and actually, maybe you can try their equipment. Or there's so many events now as well, big gaming festivals, events across not just the UK, not just Europe, but globally, where sim racing is becoming so much presence. I mean, we turn up at these events, as Alpine, as Alpine Esports, with our sim rigs, and we have people from from the age of 7 climb into those rigs, and those 7-year-olds don't care what equipment they're playing with. They just want to smash their foot on the accelerator, and smash their way around a track, laughing as they bounce from wall to wall, and they're enjoying themselves, and they'll be the people that end up being the next, I don't know whether you want to say Jimmy Broadbents or Max Verstappen's of the world, people who take what is a passion and make a career out of it, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially with the lineup that you've got, you guys made a big announcement of the lineup for Alpine Esports, especially with F1 Esports. I mean, Luke Smith, who showed great prowess with Race Clutch back at the F1 Esports exhibition. Colin Spork, a household name in sim racing. I mean, part with Tom Lartier as part of the endurance crew, Patrick Sipos and Ruben Pedreno. You've got a really, really strong lineup there. But there's one question that from not just a sim racing perspective, but from a brand perspective, understand. What does it mean to Alpine as a big manufacturer, being the sports brand of Renault, to be involved within sim racing? When you look, you've got the big players into it. Porsche with Coanda, Mercedes with their own team with James Baldwin, Jarno Opmeer. You've got Williams Esports with Dara McCormack, Igor Rodriguez. You've got all these drivers, Veloce. I mean, I could wax lyrical about the brands and manufacturers. I mean, Ferrari have also entered into esports. What does it mean to Alpine to be part as a well-recognized race car brand, especially with not just esports but also real-life racing, with, say, for example, Esteban and Pierre in the F1 team? Then you've got the new LMDH car that everyone's drooling over for World Endurance Championship next year. What does it mean to Alpine Esports to be part of a big amount of car brands that are part of this space.
Yeah, I mean, from a personal level, it's fantastic to be able to bring, our brand into the sort of playground, shall we say, of sim racing. I think sim racing, everyone's seen a massive increase in popularity and what can be done now. I think that was already sort of on the up before COVID. I think there was already sort of a progression, but I think the pandemic, as terrible as it was for many people, the sim racing industry really benefited from it because it forced people online. And when you've got F1 drivers, or you've got Le Mans drivers, or whoever, you've got these public figures jumping in their sim rigs and streaming and showing people how to get involved. The scene itself has exploded, and like you pointed out, there's so many of our competitors from a competition, a motorsport point of view, but also brand competitors from a car market point of view. Doing sim racing and esports in general, right? You've got to sort of look at that and go, well, it's a good place to be. And I think being able to take that challenge to some of those teams is always fun. Alpine isn't the biggest, flashiest brand in the in the car market. We're not here to we're not pumping millions into and billions into the industry. So it's always great whenever we can compete alongside these sort of long established names. Because Alpine itself, like you said, is sort of the sporting brand from the Renault group, and has been reborn, shall we say, from the sort of old name, right? And so where do we position ourselves in this sort of modern world? We've got we've got so many other vehicles on the road. You can sit in traffic on the M6 any day of the week and spot multiple different car manufacturers. So how do you stand out, and how do you make yourself sort of different to everyone else? And I think we're doing that as a brand in many different ways, right? The F1 team has now taken over the Renault slot and has been Alpine for a good 3 seasons now. We've just done our Pikes Peak activity over in the US and picked up a trophy there. Our Le Mans team that you mentioned, the World Endurance Championship, they picked up a podium in Monza for with the LMP2, and then we've got the hypercar, which looks incredible, even from an internal POV, right? Even if I have to say it looks beautiful, I think it does look quite nice. And what a fantastic class to be entering, right? There's so many awesome brands and car, awesome looking cars and fantastic brands entering that competition. It's quite fantastic to bring Alpine alongside those. So I think it doesn't matter whether we're sort of competing alongside the sort of big boys in F1 or in motors, in motorsport or in esports or in sim racing. I think it's a part of the modern world, right? So why not get involved, and why not try to do it slightly differently, but also try and do it in a way that the community understands and appreciates, right?
Oh, 100%. Jonny, your next question for Matt, if you've
So-
got one, buddy.
I have.
You've got plenty.
I've always got plenty to say, Alex. You should know this by now.
I do indeed.
I think for a question of where do your drivers kind of like, do they practice? Do they practice in private sessions? Do you encourage them to go and race in communities, whether it be with local communities like Sim Racing GP, or have you got local centres where they where they can go and practice, or is it just we practice in private kind of servers and then we go out and race, or do you encourage your drivers to go out and race elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously, I think it depends on what discipline the driver's sort of competing in. Some are very, I don't want to say secretive, but obviously things like F1 Esports is sort of, I guess, a bit more close knit as a community in terms of the drivers that participate at the higher level. And there are a couple of smaller leagues and tournaments that the drivers participate in, but they're not necessarily sort of part of the official F1 Esports structure or something like that, but they serve a purpose in order to develop and practice. And then the other drivers, Colin, for example, he's constantly racing in multiple series and competing across different titles and different styles of racing to really hone his racecraft. And it's something that we constantly are looking at. What's the next option for us? What's the next title that we want to compete in? What's the next what's the next competition we want to be involved in? And where can we direct that talent to be involved in that, right? If you've got people who are really good in open wheelers, for example, on specific titles, then do you want to put them forward for certain events, etc.? I think it's kind of very much down to the drivers in how they want to practice. There is, of course, mandatory sort of practice requirements, but it's about being able to hone your racecraft, and I guess that happens in many other sort of disciplines, right? Being how many F1 drivers go on to compete in other titles or other competitions, or even esports, right? How many cross-discipline players do you have? People who are really good at FPS titles. They don't they tend to dip their toes in and out of other titles, even just for fun, or even just to get familiar with what that landscape looks like, right? So I think you open yourself up to being a better racer, player, driver, whatever you want to call it, when you do more of these things. So we try and encourage, I guess, diversity in terms of practice and development. But obviously, if you're competing in a championship, you need to focus on that title for that period of time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the next question I want to come on to is obviously competitions that Alpine Esports have done in the past. Especially, we've had 3 runnings of the Alpine Esports series, which also have had the finals hosted on simracing.gp. But you've had quite a few of the big names: Dennis Schoeninger, James Baldwin, and Jardier, who have been the 3 winners of the seasons which were done in the Alpine A110 on ACC. Having those kind of drivers that are not just personalities but also liked individuals, some of them, like say Jardier, is the most I think you could probably agree with this, Jonny, that Jardier is the most positive personality within sim racing going.
Yeah.
Full stop.
100%.
It's great to see that. I looked through some of the lists of the drivers that have competed in it. By Alpine Esports creating this kind of series using the right branded product. Of course, the A110 is a fantastic real-life car in its own right, but also capable as a GT4 race in GT4 competitions globally. What does that mean to Alpine Esports to have a series like that where you can get the greater community involved and give people an opportunity to compete at the highest level?
Yeah, again, I think it's fantastic, being able to, like you say, offer that as a competition. And I think, when we first launched it, it was very sort of new, and people didn't necessarily know what it was. And we had that sort of fantastic grand prize of the track day experience of in the GT4 car, and Jardier won the first round, and due to COVID and stuff, we weren't able to sort of get him in the car until like a year or 2 later, alongside James Baldwin. So we had naturally, I was there with them in Manicourt in France, and had a fantastic day watching these 2 incredible sim racers jump inside a real race car. And I think you guys are talking about it on cast during the racing. It's amazing to see people like Jardier, like James Baldwin, jump in real cars and all of a sudden perform. It's not like you're just dragging random people off the street and saying, right, now you must drive a racing car. These are talented professionals, right? And even if they wouldn't necessarily call themselves that, or even if they wouldn't necessarily refer to themselves in that way, being able to pick up immediately how to drive the car. And chatting to these guys on site, and they were saying the car handled on the track just like it handles in game, right? And that again is really a really cool and really humbling thing to be told, right? Because you put this competition on, and you hope people are interested. You offer a prize, and you run a production, and maybe only 6 people turn up to your stream, or maybe only 10 people want to get involved, and that would be heartbreaking. But then, like you said, we've just run our third year of it, and the people trying to take part, the people watching, is growing, year on year, and I think it's become, almost like I don't want to say expected from the community, but like when it comes around, there's that remembrance, and people are like, oh yeah, that was, I watched that last time, or oh, so and so won that last time, and we get. We don't restrict who enters, so we get drivers entering from other esports teams outside of our own, and they come in and they get to drive a different car. They get to drive whether under their own sort of name, whether they're under the banner of their team. They get to come and represent. And for us, for me, I have no problem with another driver coming in, and let's say Dennis from Williams came and won this year's competition, because it just means that we're doing something right if these top talent want to come and compete in our competition, and I think it's a good feather to have in our cap, shall we say. We may or may not be doing more of them. I'm not gonna drop an exclusive reveal right this second, but certainly keep your eyes and ears out for a different competition coming from us, potentially before the end of the year. And then next year we'll have the Alpine Esports Series, year 4, which is crazy to say out loud, to be honest.
Yeah, that's quite impressive. I think the people that qualified, I think you had probably the best part of north of 35 drivers battling it out, and Dennis winning season 3. But just the caliber the caliber in sim racing, I'll be completely honest here, Matt, just keeps on going up, level
It's
after level.
incredible.
It's not like every year, it's like every week you see a new talent emerge that emerges, and you just go, where on earth did this person come from? They've come from absolutely nowhere, and they've just literally blown the doors off of the rest of the competition on a race, and then they start making progress. In terms of looking to recruit drivers, as you said, through multi-platforms, what's the approach that Alpine Esports has to scouting for talent, looking for, using like the SWOT analysis, like strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats? What's the process for recruiting a driver into a team such as Alpine Esports?
Oh, I couldn't possibly tell you. No, I think So
I had to ask the question. I had to ask it. I just thought, it's on the off chance.
It's one of those things, and I think people, there's always, like you said, there's so much emerging talent, and I think I want to give huge props to the sim racing community, because I've come from like I said, I come from an esports background. I've seen loads of different titles, and there's often a lot of sort of gatekeeping around the high level play, and there's a lot of sort of people that don't want new players coming in. I think hats off to the sim racing community, because everyone seems to be incredibly open and excited to see new emerging talent, right? There's not this sort of put down attitude that other sports or other esports titles might have, and people are really embracing new talent, and I think that's fantastic. I think, to be quite honest, the reality is, even at events, people come up to me and say, "Oh, my lad's really quick. Can he come drive for you?" Or "Oh, can I give you his sort of racing CV or something?" I think if you're good enough, we and other teams will come to you. We'll find you. I think it's not hard, like you said, sort of to spot these talents and emerging ones, especially with smaller level competitions. There's always countless new people joining, right, each year, or even just competition by competition. So I think for real, for the top tier talent, we'll come to you, right? The teams will come to those people and sort of look for them. That doesn't mean there's not a sort of exclusive invite list. I think a lot of teams now are introducing academies and bringing ways of developing staff. It's becoming so close to sort of the world of football, the world of F1. Being able to spot talent from we have a program at Alpine that we have, which is it's called our Race Her program. It's a way of getting female drivers into the world of motorsport, and actually we're testing and analysing young girls from the age of 7, to be potential F1 drivers. And you start looking at that for esports or sim racing. Where are you going to find 7-year-olds with a sim, or 7-year-old karters that also enjoy sim racing, right? It takes a bit of time to be noticed and sort of to develop to a point where where you're where you can be recruited by a team or brought on. And I think it's not just us, but every team is eyes wide open for the next Jarno Otmir, the next the next sort of number one driver, if you will, whoever that may be. And I think it's always a fun I'm trying to think from a healthy phrasing. It's always entertaining / challenging to be the one to find that driver first.
People who know me will know I'm not one for being controversial, but there is a question that kind of that came from that, and it's obviously you'll go to the drivers that interest you, that have had results. And does it also? It's obviously esports is going to be a business. It is a business. Is there a side of what that driver also brings apart from talent? So it's, have they got sponsorships they can bring? Have they got connections they can bring? Do you look at if they're streaming, how many viewers have they got? And it is a business, and I don't want to put you too much on the spot, but obviously there is these things to look at as well, and people to understand, and because I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and go, well, I haven't had a message from Alpine. Why not? I'm a sim racer.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, and it's very common in other sports, right? I think F1 is sort of known for its paid drivers, shall we say? And those people are still talented at the end of the day, right? You're not going to make it into an F1 car without being one of the best drivers in the world. But if you have a bit of backing, whether it's a nice sponsorship or if it's a father who has a lot of money, perhaps it's going to be easier for you. I don't think we've hit that point in sim racing yet, and I personally would like to not see that happen. I think the focus for me should always and from our team's perspective, the focus should always be competition. It should be that ability to perform on track. I think there are other angles for revenue. We as a team have ambassadors that we use for content creation, and we work with content creators who want to do stuff around the brand, and I think they're always perfect, or let's say perfect, but they're better ways to leverage than sticking your driver in front of a camera and saying, right, you must stream for us now because it's in your contract. I think you always want to take people who have that as a passion and develop that rather than forcing anyone to become a sort of jack of all trades, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And okay, the second part of the question then, because I'm a man of the people and I like to get they want the true answers. We all want to know where you started your sim racing journey. What's your favourite sim, and what's your favourite car in a sim? There you go.
That's a good one.
I'm going to give you this is going to be a really basic answer. I'm going to get a lot of slack for this because, like I said, so I don't have a sim racing background, or from a professional.
Alex, he's an outsider.
Oh well, yeah. Like I said,
hang on, Jonny. Give him a chance. Give the man a chance. Let him breathe first before he answers.
Look, I grew up playing the Colin McRae's of the world. I grew up playing F1 every year. Okay, so if I can go back to being 7-year-old me, sat on me, was it PlayStation, Xbox, whatever, first generation consoles, sat there, watching the Ghost overtake me because I was awful and my dad was way better than I was. That's where I'd put myself back in. If I had a time machine, I'd go back to that.
Yeah, it'd be like Colin McRae Rally and Dirt 2 and all that kind of stuff, if I remember correctly.
Exactly. Oh, we're talking about the proper. We're talking about 6 pixels on the screen here. But obviously, most of my time from a working point of view is spent with our Alpine cars in whatever title that may be. So if it's ACC, it's the A110 GT4. If it's F1, then obviously it's the Alpine F1 car, etc. So that's where I'll find myself on a sort of working basis, and I think anyone that's seen me in a sim probably thinks that's even too close for that. Favorite track is Spa, or Brazil. From an F1 circuit perspective, I crash less at Spa, but Brazil's quite fun as well. Is that acceptable? Have I given you an okay answer?
Yeah, I'll give you that. That's fine. I predate the Colin McRae games. I'm going kind of like Grand Prix 2. Grand Prix 1 even, Jeff Cameron's Grand Prix 1 and 2. So yeah, I remember having a wheel that was a Williams wheel at the time, and if it was one of the first ones that you kind of sat under your monitor, it had a big plate on it, and it sat under one of the big square monitors. And if you crashed, it actually the wheel come off, the Formula One wheel came off, so it was like you'd actually crashed, and it could. So yeah, it's good to see that we've all kind of come from a similar kind of journey, because everyone kind of it started in kind of late 90s, didn't it? So it was good.
And I think what's good about that is that, you know, again, it's become so diverse. You know, I think what started off as sim racing has just grown and grown, and there's so many more titles now, you know, that you can compete in, and you can choose to enter. You know, even from us as a car manufacturer, as a you know, we are constantly looking at new titles to put our cars into, because we want to not only open the audience up to our vehicle, but then we're also thinking about the competitive aspect of it as well now, and that's something that didn't exist a few years ago. You know, brands looking at certain titles. You know, I don't want to sort of name drop too many different things, but there's a fairly popular, you know, new title that's just had its sort of first season. You know, and we don't have a car in that game as of yet. You know, and so we're not able to compete in the first season or the second season of that title. And so you think, well, actually, from a business perspective, you know, there's a huge potential loss from us. You know, we don't have a GT3 car. We have a GT4. We have a GT3. So, you know, and I think this is where sim racing starts really playing into the, I don't want to say decision making or sort of business strategy, but I think it opens up, you know, avenues, because, you know, you start asking the question, well, what if we had a GT3 car? You know, would that be viable? What competitions can we enter? Not just virtually, but then in the real world. You know, can we start recruiting for drivers for a GT3 season? And, you know, these sorts of things. And I think it's become, you know, we talked earlier about, you know, all of the car manufacturers now have sim racing teams or sponsor esports teams, or, you know, they're so aware of the space, and I think it's becoming so you know, so influential in so many different areas of the automotive world.
Good answer. Very good answer.
Yeah, I think, as you said, Matt, opportunities, you have to sort of look at what's best for the brand in general, because obviously you're just one part of the management team at Alpine Esports. But as you said, with said title, hopefully there'll be an opportunity where we will, in the future, see Alpine Esports come into it. I'm going to date back a little bit further. I think the first ever racing game I ever played, guys, was on the Sega Mega Drive, and it was Outrun. If anyone might remember that game.
Yes, Outrun, amazing game.
Yep.
I'm thinking back to the old school arcades that I used to, you know, when you used to go on holiday to a beach or something, and you had the big blocks, and it had like six pistols and the big chunky steering wheel that didn't really actually steer. You know, you were sort of inputting left and right commands rather than steering, and an accelerator that was essentially an on-off switch. You know, again, and I think like it's one of those things as well, right? Because sim racing, you know, we sort of talked about it earlier, is not it's getting cheaper and cheaper, but it's still not the sort of cheapest thing. But I think you look at the sort of generation of people that have reached the age where they're now working jobs, they have houses, they have income, you know, and they're going, well, what do I remember? You know, what did I really enjoy when I was younger? Oh, I enjoyed these racing games. You know, and you know, maybe they watch motorsports on the weekends, maybe they go and do a bit of go-karting with their mates or whatever. But you know, they're in a position where they can invest in a rig, they can get the direct drives, and they can stick a monitor on a wall or whatever, and they can go racing. And I think that's really really enjoyable as well.
Yeah, I think with regards to, say, for instance, developments at Alpine, we talked about obviously the driver roster, but now you guys have got the content room, where there's been a 5-figure investment whereby you've got the ambassadors sort of like doing streaming from that, but also it's great for the drivers to have a firm base, like saying, if you give them a shout and say, right, okay guys, we're going to get you over to the content room, we want to do some streaming. How important is that in terms of engagement with not just the drivers as a brand, but also with regards to the greater sim racing community? How is that going to impact how Alpine Esports moves in terms of fan and viewer interaction in the future?
Yeah, I mean it's really great to have a physical sort of standing point from the Alpine Esports perspective. It exists in a space within the F1 factory, and I think that alone is already quite a fantastic thing. We've opened that content studio up to sort of the public, sort of by invite to certain events. I had a charity event there a couple weeks ago, probably over a month or so ago. But we had a bunch of disabled veterans come down to the factory. We gave them a factory tour of the F1 site, and we essentially, I don't want to say locked them in the content studio, but the studio was there with the sim set up, and yeah, okay, we weren't necessarily streaming it, we weren't recording content per se. This was more of sort of just an outreach sort of thing. But to watch a bloke who doesn't have any legs climb into the sim and sit there for an hour and a half and refuse to get out because he's having such a fantastic time, is incredible to us. And I think being able to have those opportunities, being able to, and I think being able to engage with people and interact with the community, like you sort of talked about. There's so much sim racing content out there, and there's so many streams, there's so many YouTube videos, and we have sort of big personalities. We've already name dropped several of them, and the casters were talking about even more of them beforehand. I don't think it's not actually a case of us putting ourselves up against those people and trying to say, hey, look, come to our stream, it's better than insert name. But I think it's a case of giving people the option to explore that content, right? What does a sim racing studio inside of an F1 factory look like? What does one of our drivers look like on a more casual environment? Do you want to come and drive with one of our ambassadors in a community event for a few hours on a weekend, or especially when there's no sort of competitive. Sim racing is in a fantastic spot at the moment when there's always competitions on. Kind of someone who's only ever watches Twitch, on my second monitor and on my TV. It's really enjoyable to not have to ever stop watching. But yeah, it's fantastic to just be able to provide content to people. It's fantastic to have a location that we can sort of base Alpine Esports from, and we can bring the drivers down, we can bring the ambassadors down, we can bring members of the public down. We can bring, if we want to, we can bring celebrities down, we can bring our academy drivers down, we can even bring F1 drivers or other Alpine category drivers. The ability of having somewhere physical is really great. And I think that, well, I know there'll be a lot more to come from that space as we continue to develop it and strategize around what that content plan looks like, for other things we may have already touched on in this conversation, but also things that haven't been revealed yet.
That's pretty interesting in regards to it. Sorry, Jonny.
I'm just trying to think of a question on that point. Obviously you've got simulators at Alpine, and you use them quite a lot. And people will know in Onid, I'm a huge NASCAR fan, and the NASCAR drivers themselves actually use iRacing and sim racing to get their practice in each week if they can't get out in the car and stuff. And I suppose it's, do your academy drivers and do real life drivers use the sims a lot, and do you use the sims that we at home use, or they're actually more tailored sims for you guys to practice in?
Yeah, I mean, without going into sort of super detail, a lot of our younger, especially the academy drivers, they have their own sims at home in their own space. So we don't tend to sort of, it's not our responsibility or our demand, shall we say, that they come and use our sims. The sims are available to them if they want to use them. And I think there's plenty of Instagram posts or Twitter posts of various drivers in our sims, whether it be trackside, whether it be at sort of big events, conferences, etc. I think it's always enjoyable for me to see someone like Esteban or Pierre or Victor or Gabby, for example, sit in a sim and to me it just seems like they're just enjoying themselves for even if they only get 10 15 minutes, because it's a fairly demanding routine these guys have. They're constantly in front of press, they're constantly training, whether it's physical training, mental training, there's a lot of preparation, and I think even if you just take 5 minutes out out of that routine to do something that they find enjoyable is good. But I also think there's also that sort of continuous sort of practice element to it, right? Because if you're an F1 driver and your relaxation of choice is to sit in a sim and do, I don't know, 100 laps of Bahrain, then at least you've done 100 extra laps of Bahrain, you know, in a sim, and you can potentially use some of that additional knowledge the next time you're on the circuit. You know, I think Max Verstappen was rumored to have a sim in his plane. I think that got disproved, but I think it's a good indicator of sort of where we're at with these sort of you know, the high figures within the motorsport world. But like you said, you know, there's so many different angles now to use sim racing as a tool to practice and develop skills, and you know, even things like learning new tracks, right? We had Ollie Cardwell do the virtual Le Mans for us with us at the end of last season, and he's now, you know, one of the WEC drivers for Alpine, and he drove on the Le Mans circuit for the first time ever in a real car this year. And he actually said to us, and it's a fantastic, not to plug, but there's a fantastic piece of Monza interview footage with our WEC drivers and our esports drivers over on the Alpine Esports Instagram channel. But Ollie was saying, you know, that he got to a corner that he kept sort of making a mistake on, and then he remembered how to solve that problem he remembered that happening in the sim as well, and he remembers being told what the solution was to it, and then applied it on its next lap, and he was like, oh, actually I'm suddenly 2/10 up or 3/10 up on my previous lap, because I was actually able to correct that mistake from something he'd learned from sim racing, which I think is incredible.
Yeah, it's a good point actually. Alex will back me up on this one because we know a guy. But I was talking to a good friend of mine, Will Dendy, and he races in GT Cup and British GT and all kinds of things. And I asked him this exact question. It's really interesting to see you've had the same kind of. The answer he gave was actually the skills from sim racing to real life racing are really transferable. Like, it's that close now. The technology is that close that I asked Will about dragging brakes, because ACC, a lot of drivers, they drag their brakes to heat them up to get pressure, you know, heat into the tyres, for instance. And I said, do you do that in a real car? And he was like, well, I do. I said, it works. You know, I get to turn one, and my tyres are nice and warm, and the brakes are ready, and it's all systems go. So, but the point is, it's so close technology wise now that there is so many transferable kind of aspects to it that if it was 10, 15 years ago, if you said, oh, a guy who's really good on Formula One, he's going to jump in a real Formula One car, you go, well, hold on a minute. But now you're kind of like, I can see it happening.
And I think this is the crazy thing. It's getting better, you know, even now, right? You know, even within the 12 months, let's say, of this year and last year, you know, there's been new things released, new products, new new games that are really pushing the limits of you know, what's real and what's not real. You know, we have a fantastic partnership with a VR brand, you know, Vario, and our sim racing partners as well. And we have what we sort of call our ultimate sim, and it's this fantastic sort of motion VR blend, you know, simulator. And we took that to an event in February this year, and both Pierre and Esteban jumped in the sim, and they both got off, and they sort of said after about 10 minutes of being in this, they forgot they were in a game, or they forgot they were in a room surrounded by other people. Their brains defaulted to being on track at the circuit. You know, they defaulted to being I don't think was it Paul Ricard. I think they defaulted to being on track, trying to set their qualifying pace lap for that track. And you know, I think we're looking at a really fantastic point where we've got, you know, so much crossover between real racing and sim racing. I don't necessarily think we'll see, you know, the next F1 world champion being just a sim racer. I think you still need that physical element. You need the fear, and I think that's something that sim racing obviously lacks as its fundamental. I don't want to say flaw because it's not a flaw because it's separate from real racing. But you know that's the difference between on-track racing and sim racing is that fear, and you know the best drivers in the world are the ones that manage that fear to an absolute nth degree. And I think you'll always need karting, or you'll always need sort of lower division racing to pick that up. But in terms of understanding when to brake, how to brake, when to turn, what and especially when you start adding things like motion and I want to say G-force, but you know what I mean, that sort of simulated version of it to sim rigs. That's when you really start hitting this level of actually when does it become just being in a real car, if that makes sense.
Well, I've got a question, Matt.
Of
When
course.
Pierre and Esteban were on that full motion simulator, who was fastest out of the two?
I wasn't there, so I can't answer that question.
Well, hey, it was worth a try.
It
It
was
was
a
worth
good
a
try.
try.
It's a good try.
I think also by having two French drivers in a team representing Alpine at the pinnacle of motorsport is so great. But like you said, it was really, really interesting when you said about the fact that when Pierre and Esteban went in that full motion simulator, they went after 10 minutes, we couldn't tell the difference. I mean, I've come from IRL commentary into casting and sim racing. And when people said to me, how did you feel on your first cast? I went, I still got the goosebumps. I still got the hairs standing on the back of my neck. I mean, whenever you see the drivers from Alpine Esports go into competition at the highest level, what's the feeling that you get apart from the fact that you've got to not only manage them, but then you're in their corner, backing them up to the hilt and saying like, okay, I want you to enjoy yourselves, but go out there and do the business. What are your first thoughts when you're watching, like, say, Luke or Colin or whoever on the team going into a race, and you're like thinking, are you like one of these people that bites your fingernails to the quick?
I'm terrible. I can't. It's not I can't watch it. I do watch it. I'm a very passionate person as an individual. Anyone who's sat next to me watching an F1 race will know I scream and shout at that just as much as I do at League of Legends or any other esport titles. So I'm the exact same when it comes to sim racing. And we had an incredibly nail biting fight on the last lap of the Le Mans Virtual with Williams for third place at the end of last season. I don't know if you guys sort of saw that moment itself.
I remember that one.
But as we were fighting tooth and nail to get that position from Williams, I was on the I was standing up, I was shouting at the screen. I'm trying to obviously. So I don't sit on comms with the drivers, probably for the best. But I'm doing the exact same thing that I was doing when Esteban was holding third place going around Monaco, right? You want that victory, you want that moment, and not only do you want it for yourself because you're a fan of the team, but you want it for the driver, you want it for the team as a whole, you want it to prove and justify, without getting sort of emotional on this whole thing. But Alpine Esports is a very smally ran organization. We're very new to the space compared to some of the bigger names, and to be able to even steal away a podium from a big name in a top level competition, that makes us feel, it makes me, it makes us incredibly proud of what we do, and that's really what you're chasing, right? You're chasing that feeling of success, and then obviously on the other end, when it doesn't go well, when you crash out or when someone hits you or whatever, and the drivers are frustrated, and we know, you can see it. You don't have to see their webcam to know what they're feeling and how they are in that moment, and then that's when you sort of management skills kick in. You have to come back to them as soon as possible and say, don't worry, it's okay, you'll do better next time, or we'll fix it for next time. And it's incredibly, for me, look, I treat it as I do any sport, any other. Am I millennial? Oh God, I'm a millennial. And I love my esports as much as I love my real sports. So as much as I'll shout at football, I'll shout at F1, or I'll shout at the whatever snowboarding at the Olympic. I don't know, whatever people watch. I'll shout just as much for esports. And so yeah, sim racing is absolutely no different for me. And I want my boys to do as good as they can, as often as they can. so I can keep doing this job.
You know what? That's a fantastic answer there, Matt. I mean, it just goes to show that everyone has their own unique character and sort of role within this space. I think it's the same with me. Like say with casting, when I did the Sim Racing Expo last year, there were so many moments where I was just like thinking, "What on earth is going on here?" And then I go past and I see an Alpine from 2 years ago display car on a stand. I'm like thinking, and you know when you have to do that double take, that's exactly what I did. Um, but yeah, I mean that was a great answer. It just goes to show that we are all passionate at the end of the day, Jonny.
Oh, 100%. And I'm the owner of Owned Racing, and I've got currently 3 teams in the race we're on now, and I'm keeping an eye on the Owned Camsport boys, up in 6th, and my heart's going, it's a good finish for these guys. They're, doing a really great job, and you've got to have passion and to be where the positions we're in. You have to be passionate. You have to believe in it. You have to love it. You kind of I'm very fortunate in what I do, and Alex, I met you a long time ago, and I was just a guy that used to turn up to a place in Milton Keynes, and
Yes.
now, and now look at me, I decided I was going to run a community because I enjoyed it so much, and I'm passionate about it, and I want to be able to offer things to other people, and to be in, one of the biggest communities on simracing.gp, and I have a good amount of teams, I've got Camsport and Go for the Gap and Simhound rookies and stuff. And these people have, they've come to us, and it's not that I've been out looking, and want to be part of a success. And we're never going to be up there with the likes of Veloce or Alpine or anyone like that. We're never going to be there, but we enjoy what we do, and I'm pleased for the guys. I'm pleased for these guys today. They've put a lot of effort into this one, and Bathurst is a tricky track, so I'm watching. I've got kind of one eye on the stream and one eye on this, and kind of hoping, because you never switch off as a community owner either.
No, you never do. I mean, Matt, I wanted to talk about something we haven't really touched on. We've talked about the content room at Alpine Esports, but we haven't talked about LAN events, because obviously when COVID hit, we were very, very restricted as a community. Everything was online, as you said earlier on. We had the Race All-Stars, we had a lot of leagues, a lot of championships coming through. But now that we have gotten through those murky waters and we've come out the other side of it, to now see LAN events really, really coming back to the fore as we saw before the pandemic, like say with F1 Esports and the Gfinity Arena, for instance. What are your thoughts on how LAN events are now coming back, and they're coming back with a vengeance, aren't they?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic, and I think it's what sim racing needs to bring that new audience it's got. To show them that this is not just people in their bedrooms. This isn't just some sort of community led thing. But these teams, these organisations are capable of putting on massive shows. And I think it's something that the esports industry already does quite well. People that are fans of other sort of gaming titles will have seen massive LAN events held in some of the most fantastic stadiums and locations around the world. And I think it's absolutely time that we bring esports. We bring sim racing to those locations, to those places. We get people in the audience, we get people coming and meeting the drivers, meeting the players, whatever you want to call them. Getting involved with their fans, because there's people out there buying merchandise for these esports teams, and be able to get that signed by the driver for that team. That's something you can't do from a bedroom. So I think LAN events are certainly incredible to have. I don't think we should only have LAN events. I think online is necessary in order to support those big events. It's where you find your talent, it's where you get involved with your community, it's where the lower people have a chance to show their talent and try and rise up through the competition. And I think LAN is so well supported by online events anyway. So it's I'm really excited for what for what events are coming. Even just what we've seen already since the pandemic ended, and what's to come from so many different titles. I think it's really going to be really exciting. And I think the more of them I can get to, better it's going to be for me because I don't have to sit in an office.
Minimise desk time as best you can there, Matt.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I mean that's the thing. It's like we're all stuck on the end of a video camera, but on Discord and having a wonderful conversation. But as you said, Matt, the greater sense of community is when you are in person and talking to individuals. You know, like saying, "Oh yeah, remember when we had that chat?" And then you also like reminisce, and then it becomes like a bit of a mosh pit gathering, so to speak, where everyone just congregates in the same place, doesn't it? It's a wonderful feeling.
As a big fan of heavy metal, I love that terminology.
I know I like you, Matt.
I tidied up for this. The wall behind me was covered with vinyls of all sorts of fairly loud, shouty bands. So
Good work.
I'd put them back. No, but it's fantastic. It's great that you mentioned that because we just did an event. We supported our colleagues, our F1 colleagues, at an event for one of our sponsors down in London, and Luke Smith, who's one of our F1 Esports competition drivers. He came to do a bit of sort of like not necessarily a meet and greet, but sort of like a bit of coaching session and stuff. And people were coming up to him. This is on the bank of the Thames in London. People were coming up to him and going, "You're Luke Smith. You're Alpine's esports driver." And this is, Luke. I don't know how much you guys know about him, but he's a young lad. This is only his second season. He's done one season in the F1 series. To have people come up to him and recognise him, I think was a massive eye opener for him, but also an eye opener for me as well. Because it's like, I don't think we realise, right, just how many people now are involved in this space and how many people are passionate about these topics, about these competitions, about these drivers, and so to have those conversations. And so, I'm stood there as a sort of Luke's, not just, I don't want to say babysitter for the day, but, I'm there making sure he's having a good time and that he's all right, and he's stood there having this half an hour chat with this, with this fan who's asking him about how he sets up the car and, what equipment he uses and, what's it like, what does he think about the new season, what does he think of this driver? And, I think that's, you could parallel that to any other sport, and it would just feel like a totally normal conversation, right? For a fan to have with an F1 driver, with a football player, with a hockey player, with a basketball player, and so it's just felt so incredibly organic and healthy to witness that. And so, and I encourage sort of anyone listening, when you're at these events, please do talk to people from teams or talk to drivers because they're so passionate and they want to share that knowledge and that love for the community with you. Don't, if they're just crashed and walking away, please don't go up to them and ask them why they spun off. But like being
Yeah.
you got to be sensible when you. I mean, you wouldn't speak to an F1 driver after he's just shunted it into the wall. So
no,
or a footballer when they've missed a penalty. You know what I mean?
Because the first thing they're going to do is walk away in the other direction, 100%. There is actually quite a funny story that a lot of people might not know about. Because, of course, Luke Smith is one of your F1 esports drivers. However, there is a current F1 journalist whose name is also Luke Smith. And the amount of times my journalist friend got name-checked when it was actually... they added him on Twitter, or X as it's now called. God forbid. It was so easy when it was called Twitter rather than having some sort of Roman numeral. I think it's just Elon Musk's.
Are we calling it 10? Can we call it 10 from now on?
Yeah, well, it was a bit like it was like Apple with the iPhone, wasn't it? The amount of times that they were tagging my friend Luke, the F1 journalist, and they were meant to tag your Luke instead, Matt, which was absolutely hilarious. And I was just like thinking, how many times is this going to happen? And like over a period of 3 weeks, I think my friend Luke got tagged about 15 times. It was meant for the other Luke Smith, your one at Alpine, when he was because at the point he was racing for Race Clutch at the time, and he'd really made big waves in the F1 esports community. So there's a little bit of funny trivia for you sim racing people out there.
we need more unique English names. That's all I'm going to say.
I know.
I mean, Luke Smith.
Could have been John Smith.
Come on, well, yeah.
I know. It's
sorry, Alex. Going back to what we said and what you just touched on, Matt, and with Alex, is we forget sometimes that sim racing's worldwide. Mm-hmm. So we all race in communities, or we're part of communities, and we do our jobs in communities that is all across the world. And the one thing I've always liked to do, and I've done in Onid, is we have meetups. And people, if they can get over, they come over, and we have a meet up at Silverstone. We do a Christmas party every year in Milton Keynes, and it's really nice to kind of meet these people and strengthen those relationships. And, I do my admin party every year, and I know Cammy spoke about it earlier about the party, and just to thank my guys for doing the work they do. But actually, people walking up to me and going, "Oh, you must be Jonny," and I'm like, "I know your voice, but I don't know your face."
Yeah.
And it's so bizarre. It's so bizarre, and Steph's touched on it in chat as well with the expo is massive for that, isn't it? And bringing her whole community, because sim racing is just one big community that keeps growing and growing. Mm-hmm. Having the expo to bring that back, everyone together, is only going to make sim racing more appealing to more people, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, like you said, it's a global sport, and I think the fact that it's online, right, is again one of those reasons, because you can connect with people from Europe, the US, Asia. You can connect with people all over the world, and you can race against them, you can compete with them, and you can speak to them afterwards. You can congratulate them, or you can curse them out. I don't know. You can choose to do whatever you want. We run our Alpine Esports series, and we look at the stats afterwards, and we're like, oh, there's people watching from France and England and Germany and Spain, but then we get people watching from Mexico or Turkey or India, and you're thinking, this is something that we forget, right? Because we're a car brand, we're based, certainly in Central Europe, but we're very known across France, a bit of England, a bit of Germany. But to all of a sudden be able to offer something like sim racing and esports to a global audience is incredible. And I think, again, there's going to be more and more of this connectivity, whether it's these big sort of LAN events, whether it's expos. I use LinkedIn a lot, and I'm connected with so many people, and I'm seeing posts from community competitions being run in India, being run in South America, being run in South Africa. People are coming together in their small little groups to do something they're passionate about, and they then find a way to, they find that leads to a much bigger group of like-minded people, and that's incredible, because you're having all these different touch points with all these different people, and it's fantastic to share that passion, right? And I think it's only going to get bigger, and it's only going to get stronger, and like I said, sort of right in the beginning, it's incredible how little effort it takes people to get involved in the community. The community is so open and so sort of receptive, and it doesn't matter what car you choose to drive, or what equipment you choose to use, or which team you support, or whatever. People are just really happy to have you on board and come and join their audience. It's like the sort of local car meetups. I don't know if you guys have ever sort of been to one of those sort of events, but you get people with their Mazda MX-5s or their Lotuses or their MGs or whatever, and they go spend, and they'll just talk about their lives and their cars for hours, and it's like that, but on a global scale. And I think it's something that everyone should be really proud to be a part of.
Yeah, I mean, coming back to obviously the Alpine side of things, how supportive is the parent, like the F1 team, and also Alpine in general? Because we know that Alpine is part of the Renault brand; it's the sporting arm of it. How supportive are they, with regards to giving you in terms of, let's say, making a decision, saying they give you that autonomy to sort of go, right, okay, what do you think's best for it? And you'll have a discussion, and they'll go, yeah, okay, we're cool with that. How much sort of freedom are you given within your position at Alpine Esports to help push the brand forward in a direction that suits Alpine's thought process?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting question, because I guess it's a sort of deeper dive into how we operate as a business. But we, from my perspective, we have a very strong relationship, working relationship with the mother brand, as you might want to sort of call it. You know, when we turn up at events and we turn up with F1 cars, we turn up with Alpine cars, we turn up with, you know, drivers or you know, or staff from across the sort of universe of Alpine, you know, and it's incredible to be able to walk into the office, you know, and I walk past people working on F1 cars, I walk past, you know, the reception, and I get to see the models, and you know, but I also get to walk past some of the senior you know, senior decision makings from the brand, and we have so many events where we're all in one room, and you know, they're more than happy, whether they work for the F1 team, whether they work for the WEC team, whether they work for the car, you know, manufacturing plant or anything. They're more than happy to just have a conversation about the business and and where we're going and what the aim is, you know. And our aim from the esports side is to help, you know, raise awareness of Alpine, you know, in as much positive light and knowledge as possible. And you know, we're doing that, and I think when we do that, we get, you know, we get positive comments from senior management, we get, you know, and we get trusted, you know. Every time we do something successful, there's more trust in the next request and the next suggestion. You know, we just sponsored as Alpine the last ever CS:GO major in Paris, you know, and that was ran through us as the esports side of Alpine. You know, usually we're focused on sim racing, but like I said, I have this sort of esports background, and so we were able to sort of say, look, here's this fantastic opportunity. It's this big esports event. It's in our, you know, it's in our country. It's in France. It's in Paris. You know, and we've got this fantastic idea, and they basically, you know, they turned to us and said, we trust you. You know, go ahead and make that activation, make that partnership, and make it work for the brand. And you know, I think we did a fantastic job of doing that as well. And you know, I think time will only tell, you know, just how successful we can grow Alpine Esports to be. But you know, for as long as we're being successful and you know, we're gaining trust, you know, we've got that trust internally, and you know, it's about being one team at the end of the day. You know, we have a sort of like a few sort of fundamental pillars that the sort of brand tries to operate on, and you know, one of those is sort of compete every day, and so it doesn't matter what the competition is, whether it's a sim racing competition, whether it's a motorsport competition. You know, the attitude is sort of always the same. You know, trying to drive ourselves to being the best that we can be for the brand. Which was a very political answer. I feel like it's very. You forced me into a very sort of
took a very serious turn.
It's a Sunday afternoon, and you've got me working. It's,
No. I think at the end of the day, it's always different between brands. I mean, I worked in the automotive industry. Renault, funny enough, was one of those brands. So I had an experience with like the Megane RS and all those kind of cars. But then seeing Alpine come back, you know, I still remember the days of Jean Ragnotti ripping the rear tyres out of an R5 turbo. And then obviously when Alpine came back as a brand, we saw, I have to say, a wonderful vignette video from Alpine with the old school A110S back in the 70s, and then you get the concept car, and now we've got the current sports car, like the flagship for Alpine, the A110S, and we still see Jean Ragnotti at his age running around like a kid in a candy store. You put him behind the wheel, that bloke will shred a set of rear tyres quicker you could say the word jump. And if you want to find out who Jean Ragnotti is, Google it. But no, I mean, that's really, really insightful with regards to like the empowerment that Alpine give you guys on the esports side. That's really, really interesting, because brand awareness is crucial in sim racing, but also going cross-platform in that respect as well. When you said about the CS:GO tournament in Paris, in Alpine's backyard, there was no hesitation from yourself with regards to not just the sim racing space, but also esports in general. There's a lot of borders that could be crossed, can't there?
I think, yeah. I mean, again, you know, no, and I don't think that's necessarily just something we're doing esports. You know, you look at Alpine as a brand. You know, we sponsored the Ballon d'Or at the end of last year as well. So, you know, we've got Nicola Adams, you know, multi-world champion boxer, as one of our brand ambassadors and as part of that sort of race her program. And you know, we haven't brought her on board because she's also a world champion race car driver. We brought her on because she's passionate about developing young talent, and it doesn't matter what that what that competition is and what that challenge is, shall we say? People like her and people like across Alpine are up for that challenge. It's that competition, it's that drive. You said with the sort of sports side of Renault, and I think Alpine really does embrace that culture of we're here to compete. We're entering more and more competitions. As a brand, we've just announced a huge investment from a couple of stakeholders for a large chunk of a reasonable chunk of the F1 side, and they're bringing a massive next step of sort of knowledge and investment and development for the brand. We've got 7 cars being launched between now and 2030. Road cars that anyone in chat can go and test drive and purchase for themselves if they want to. I think it's how you grow a brand organically, right? Because I think you can swan into this world like some brands do and throw billions at it and sort of go, look, we're here, we're established, come buy our product, blah blah blah. But I think there's so much to be said for naturally engaging with the people that the people that want to engage with us and want to support the brand. I think it's one of those things people will always say. People always have a favorite car brand, or they'll have a favorite this or a favorite that. But I think there's also room to like other teams or like other brands, and you're not necessarily always in direct competition with every brand all of the time, right? So it's finding a healthy balance to all of that.
How far do you think esports goes? How far do you think crossovers goes, for instance? Because I've just got it in my head. I said, how we have triathlons and Ironman events that in real sport, obviously. How good would it be if you could do like CS:GO, sim racing, and League of Legends, and best of 3? Or where does it go? Do you in your head do you have somewhere you think, I think it's going this route, or do you think the world is the oyster regarding esports?
I could tell you, but then I'd be giving away all my secrets and I'd lose my job. So I don't think that's worth it. No, I mean, look, there have been attempts, shall we say, at sort of cross stimulating different esports titles. I'm not going to comment on the success or lack of success of those titles, because it's not really for me as an individual to criticize. I think the community as a whole makes its opinion known, and I think when an event is successful, you see that success, right? And I think when an event isn't successful, we all sort of collectively know. And I think would I love to have a CS:GO team and an esports, a League of Legends team, and I don't know. I mean, honestly, it's such a different beast when you compare them to sim racing, for example. Is it possible? Sure, why not? Why not have your Alpine League of Legends team or your Alpine CS:GO team? I mean, but does it make sense? And that's where the question comes in. It's about doing the right thing and doing the right thing at the right time, right? We're still relatively young as a team exists. I think esports is in an interesting place at the moment where there are famous big teams crumbling and people are sort of screaming it's the death of esports, but then you've got smaller teams making it through to competitions that no one thought they would, or announcing massive sponsorships with brands that understand esports, because again, that's also part of it. How do you fund all of this? Like, it's great to have 6 different teams, but if you're not funding, if you can't fund it, then at some point a decision's got to be made. So look, I think the world of esports is going to continue to grow. I think it's become a staple now for the younger generations. As much as I grew up watching football and F1, I think younger kids will grow up watching CS:GO and League of Legends, or or whatever the version is at the time. I think it's fairly cyclical that new titles come and drag people to their audience, and then people are keen to play the newest thing, whether it's the newest esport game, newest sim racing game, whatever. But I think that esports is certainly an interesting industry to work in. It's an interesting industry to watch, and I think there's a lot more to come, and I'm excited to see where it goes, and excited to be a part of it as well. And if we can carve out a little corner for Alpine for where that sits, then that's even better.
Yeah. Stefan Herfelom on the chat has just come through with a question. Catching on that, Matt, if you had one full free choice, budget being no question whatsoever, in what way would you invest to help push Alpine further as a brand?
Alpine as a brand in terms of just the esports side.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think ultimately sticking to the core that we have, which at the moment, which is sim racing, I think I'd invest that sort of ultimate, unlimited money, shall we say, into something around development between multi-platforms, cross titles, really explore the, and push the boundaries of what's possible in terms of crossing the threshold between real racing and sim racing, and trying to blur that line as much as possible. And I think, because we're all already doing it. Every F1 team has an esports team, and their drivers are generating heaps of data just from their sim racing that can be potentially applicable to real racing. I'd invest heavily in that and try and find that ultimate sort of crossover point and try and blur that line as much as possible. I don't know if that's a sort of a direct answer, because I can't necessarily say I'd invest in one particular thing, but I think I'd invest in the ecosystem that is sim racing and how we can use it as a car brand, as a motorsport brand, to just elevate everything we do. Because that's one of our goals and one of our aims anyway. So giving me unlimited budget to do that would be great.
I think
is that a good answer?
I think you should invest in the community.
I knew that was coming. I knew that was coming straight away, Jonny. Actually,
to be fair, can I give a second answer?
Yeah. Feel free, Matt. The floor is yours.
If I could host the Alpine Esports Series live as a LAN event in an iconic stadium, probably in France, let's say Stade de France. If I could take the floor of Stade de France, I could equip it with 30 to 40 simulators and have the crowd watch with massive screens and massive prizes. I think that'd be incredible as a community event, as a spectacle. If I had unlimited budget, I'd do that.
Could I add a little something to that? Okay,
it's my idea. What are you on about?
No. But I want to add something that might help to bolster it. You said the finals at the Stade de France. What about hosting the qualifiers on the Champs-Élysées, for instance?
Oh well, we're just getting too French now.
Hey, we're talking Alpine Esports here, my friend.
Yeah. Why don't we tour? No, let's tour. Let's start off in London, then go to Berlin.
There we go.
Then do the finals in Paris. I think that's the goal. Like I said, if you had unlimited budget, right, you'd do that in a heartbeat. For 2024, for 2024's Alpine Esports Series. I can't promise that's going to happen to anyone looking to participate. It'd be nice. If anyone out there is secretly a billionaire and wants to donate to make that happen, let me know.
Yeah, I don't know it. Unfortunately, I don't know any billionaires, Jonny. What about you?
Absolutely not. No.
Yeah, I mean, coming to obviously the road car side of Alpine, Matt, have you driven any of the cars? Have you driven the A110?
I have driven the A110. Yeah.
Now I'm really jealous.
Very jealous. Yeah.
I've driven the A110. I've driven the A110S, and I've driven the A110 GT. I haven't driven the R.
That's the latest one they've just brought out, isn't it?
The latest one, yeah. The R is sort of the top of the range spec of the A110.
What was your favourite?
They're all very similar in terms of they're all A110s, right?
Yeah.
The S that I drove specifically was in the Sunburst Orange. With the spoiler, the carbon fiber spoiler. So in terms of sort of looks, that one's certainly my preferred one. I actually missed out on driving the GT4 on the track day experience because of the weather. So that was unfortunate.
That is a bit of a bugger. That is really. I mean,
But,
you
you know,
get to they go, yeah, the weather's rubbish. Sorry, Matt, you're not going in. Damn, I'll have to wait.
well, obviously we were there with Jardier and James,
Yeah.
so the priority was to make sure they got the experience that was deemed worthy of them winning the series. So I was but an afterthought, which is fine. Who knows? Maybe I'll get the chance. We've got the A290 coming out next year, which is our electric streetcar, little hot hatch, which I think personally looks quite fun. I think that would be, I think that's a fairly nice looking car for people who are into their sort of street hot hatches, especially if you're a fan of electric vehicles, etc. Could be an interesting one. I'm looking forward to driving that one.
Yeah, I thought that was quite an intuitive way of how Alpine decided to release, like unveil the car, and then
quite esports, don't you think? Quite
it
gamery,
was.
quite gamified. Yeah, you'd have
It
to
was.
wonder who was in the room when that was being discussed. But look,
Yeah,
can't give away any key marketing decisions.
No, I think the thing is that with digitalization becoming, that's been a part of esports and sim racing from day dot. Let's not forget, there's a lot of things going on with regards to data analysis, whether it's F1 esports, ACC. It does not matter. There's a lot of people that use different software to pick up data and analyze it from races that they've done. But then the way that digitalization is now going into the automotive industry as a sort of like not a sidestep but a big part of it. Could we see? Do you think, Matt, that in the future that not only will your car on your driveway be your car for driving on the road, but we could probably see the fact that you hook up a few USB cables or a Bluetooth connection and it becomes your simulator in house? That'd be pretty cool, wouldn't it?
Interesting. I think that's a really cool concept. I'm not going to talk too much about that as a concept because I think
there's a secret.
There is a smile on your face, Mr. Bintcliffe.
No, I mean, wouldn't that be the ultimate goal of any manufacturer? I think. I'm not going to sit here and say conversations haven't happened where that sort of thing has been discussed because I think we've had that conversation. I'm sure so many other manufacturers have had that conversations. I think there's a lot of also restrictions in that side of things. To do that, you'd have to want to make it right. You want to get it the exact way. I think we've started seeing it. We've got some interesting brands doing some interesting collaborations when it comes to sort of real world car parts that can also be used for sim racing, and there's certainly some really fantastic pieces of equipment out there, and again, where that's going to ultimately go, could you get into your Alpine on your driveway and use it as a sim for 2 hours and then also drive it down to Tesco's? I mean, sure, why not? Other supermarkets are available, but
helps.
Also, would you want to? I don't know. I think that's the other question. Would you want your sim to also be your car? I mean, I don't know. Like, you can't. I think there's also a healthy separation, right? And
well, I don't know. I drive my car like I'm in a sim. So.
Okay.
Like you stole it, Jonny.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I think the way that digitalization, as I said earlier on, is evolving to the point where there is so much crossover. But I think there'll be a point where that technology is in place. Whether it's there now is a bone of contention because we don't know how technology is going to evolve over the next 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, whatever. It's like with smartphones; they come out every year or every 6 months, don't they?
Exactly, and I think maybe here's a more sort of realistic concept that you can sort of maybe wrap your head around if you're not necessarily as involved in this as a topic. If you could use data tools that you use whilst you're sim racing for your road driving, you could become a better driver on the road. If you could brake when you're supposed to brake rather than when you think you're supposed to brake, or if you can take corners at a safer, in a safer way, then you can reduce tire wear, or you can reduce, fuel inefficiency. Maybe there's ways of sort of sim race, using concepts in sim racing, or digitalized racing, whatever you want to call it, to adapt road cars and make them more beneficial, make those things more more efficient, or more enjoyable. Maybe there's gamification in terms of how you stay awake during traffic, or how you stay awake on the motorway. If you're driving from Land's End to John Groats, then you're going to want to stay awake and drive that as enjoyably as possible. And maybe there's options there, if that makes sense. I think maybe that's a more realistic first step before we then start getting into these crazy ideas of having your sim racing rig be your mode of transport at the same time.
Yeah, well, we're sort of running out of time here on the Sim Racing GP podcast, powered by Moser Racing. Jonny, have you got a final question for Mr. Bintcliffe before we wrap things up?
I think we've covered everything, to be honest. I don't want to go too deep and official on things. Prediction on the race: who do you think is going to win, or what manufacturer would you like to see win?
Well, there's no Alpine, so
Come on, out of the ones that are there. Come on.
That was shot down in flames quicker than someone could say the word jump there, Mr. Ashley.
I don't know who's got the best name. I'll tell you who's got the best name.
Well, we've got leading. We've got Genesis Esports. Then we've got their academy team in second. Fusion Racing. Oh, there's. Okay, well, I'm going to read out some names, Matt. So we've got Sim Racing Alliance, Final Drive Sim Racing, FRS Scuderia Bloodline, Onid Sim Hound Rookies. Jonny will be happy I mentioned that one first.
Absolutely.
Genesis Esports, Swiss Bear Racing, RPM Motorsports, Hymo Huffers, Cracked Racing, Invincible Haters, Wild Things Racing by Colex.gg. There's a whole list of names there. I could go down all 24.
I'm going to go with Invincible Haters, just because. What a name! Look.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's so many esports teams that have such boring names. Why not go with something more a bit
out there?
Out there. Why not? Yeah, sure.
I used to like you, Matt.
Sorry. Apologies.
No, but Matt Bintcliffe from Alpine Esports, thank you so much for jumping on board with myself and Jonny Ashley for the third edition of the SGP podcast powered by Moser Racing. All the very best of luck to the team and what's coming up next for you guys. Thank you very much for joining us.
Cheers. Thank you very much. Cheers for having me, guys. All the best.
Jonny, thank you very much for joining me as well, and thank you for jumping in as well. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be back in just a few minutes' time as we will resume our coverage of the third round of the Moser Racing Endurance Championship powered by Sim Racing GP just after these short messages. Well, firstly, a big thank you to Matt Bintcliffe from Alpine Esports joining myself, Alex Goldschmidt, and Jonny Ashley for the third edition of